Imagine being the most famous woman in history. Your name recognized on every continent, your face painted, sculpted, filmed, and studied for 2,000 years. And almost everything people believe about you is completely wrong. That is the story of Cleopatra. She was not Egyptian. She did not look like Elizabeth Taylor. She was not simply a beautiful seductress who used her looks to survive. She was one of the most brilliant, calculated, and powerful rulers the ancient world had ever seen. A woman who spoke 9 languages, commanded armies, controlled the wealthiest nation on earth, and came closer to ruling the entire known world than almost any person in history. Tonight, we are uncovering the real Cleopatra, not the Hollywood version, not the myth, the truth. To understand Cleopatra, we first need to understand where she came from. Egypt in 69 BC was not ruled by Egyptians. It was ruled by a Greek dynasty called the Ptolemies, descendants of one of Alexander the Great's generals. For nearly 300 years, the Ptolemaic rulers of Egypt had refused to learn the Egyptian language. They spoke Greek. They lived as Greeks. They considered themselves Greek. Cleopatra was different. She was the first ruler of her dynasty to actually learn to speak Egyptian. And she did not stop there. She also learned Ethiopian, Hebrew, Arabic, Median, Parthian, and several other languages. 9 languages in total. Not because she was showing off, but because she understood something her ancestors had missed. If you speak to people in their own language, they will follow you anywhere. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC, the second child of Pharaoh Ptolemy XII, a weak ruler who was deeply unpopular with his own people. Egypt was rich, incredibly rich, but it was also surrounded by threats. Rome was rising. Rome was hungry. And Rome had a habit of swallowing kingdoms whole. When Cleopatra's father died in 51 BC, she became co-ruler of Egypt at just 18 years old, sharing power with her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII, whom she was also, by Egyptian custom, required to marry. Within 3 years, her brother's advisors had staged a coup. Cleopatra was driven out of Egypt. She was 21 years old, exiled, and living in the desert with a small army. Most rulers would have accepted defeat. Cleopatra began planning her comeback. At that exact moment, the most powerful man in the world arrived in Egypt, Julius Caesar, fresh from a civil war, sailing into Alexandria harbor. Cleopatra could not simply walk into the palace to meet him. Her brother's guards would have killed her on sight. So, according to ancient sources, she had herself rolled inside a carpet, smuggled past the guards, and unrolled directly in front of Caesar. Whether this story is literally true or simply legend, what happened next is not in dispute. Caesar was captivated, not just by her appearance, but by her intelligence, her confidence, and her extraordinary political mind. Cleopatra spoke to Caesar in Latin, his own language, something almost no foreigner could do. Within days, Caesar had taken her side. He helped her reclaim the Egyptian throne. Her brother, Ptolemy XIII, fled and drowned in the Nile. Cleopatra was queen of Egypt once more. Her relationship with Caesar was not just romantic. It was strategic. Egypt needed Rome's protection. Rome needed Egypt's grain and wealth. Together, they toured the Nile on a magnificent golden barge, a political display designed to show the people of Egypt that their queen commanded the most powerful man in the world. Cleopatra had a son with Caesar, named Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar. She believed this child would one day unite Egypt and Rome under a single dynasty, with herself at the center. Then, in 44 BC, Julius Caesar was assassinated, stabbed 23 times in the Roman Senate. Cleopatra lost her most powerful protector overnight. She returned to Egypt. She waited. She watched. Rome collapsed into another brutal civil war between Caesar's allies and assassins. Two men emerged from that chaos: Mark Antony and Octavian. They divided the Roman world between them. Mark Antony took the eastern half, which included Egypt's sphere of influence. He summoned Cleopatra to meet him. He expected her to come as a subject, someone under his authority. Cleopatra had other ideas.
She arrived in the city of Tarsus on a golden barge with purple sails, silver oars, and the smell of burning incense drifting across the water. She was dressed as Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Servants fanned her, musicians played around her. The entire city stopped to watch her arrival. Mark Antony, one of the most powerful men alive, was left sitting alone at his own banquet because every single person in the city had gone to see Cleopatra arrive. She did not go to him, she invited him to dinner instead. This was not romance, this was power. Cleopatra understood that perception is everything in politics. She needed Antony to see her not as a subject, but as an equal, perhaps as something even greater. Their alliance became one of the most famous partnerships in history. Together they controlled enormous territory. Cleopatra received back lands that Egypt had lost for generations. She was rebuilding her empire piece by piece. Her ultimate goal was clear: an independent Egypt, free from Roman control, with her children ruling alongside her as a dynasty that would last for centuries. But in Rome, Octavian watched all of this with growing alarm. He launched a propaganda campaign against Cleopatra, portraying her as a dangerous foreign witch who had enchanted Antony and was planning to rule Rome itself. He declared war, not on Antony, but on Cleopatra personally. That was a political masterstroke. It meant Romans were not fighting a civil war against a fellow Roman, they were defending Rome against a foreign enemy. In 31 BC, the forces of Octavian and the forces of Antony and Cleopatra met at the Battle of Actium off the coast of Greece. It was a naval disaster for Cleopatra and Antony. Their fleet was defeated, they retreated to Egypt. And then something strange happened. Antony received a false report that Cleopatra had died. In his grief, he fell on his own sword. He died in Cleopatra's arms. Now Cleopatra was truly alone. Octavian marched into Alexandria. He wanted Cleopatra alive. He planned to take her to Rome in chains, to display her in his victory parade as proof of his conquest of the East. Cleopatra refused. She was not going to be humiliated. She was not going to be a trophy. According to ancient sources, she arranged a final meeting with Octavian, dressed in her full royal regalia, composed and dignified. Then she died. The most widely accepted account says she allowed an asp, a venomous snake, to bite her, though some historians believe she may have used poison instead. She was 39 years old. With her death, 3,000 years of Egyptian civilization effectively ended. Egypt became a Roman province. Octavian, who would become Augustus Caesar, had her son Caesarion executed, cutting off the last bloodline that could challenge his authority. But who was Cleopatra really? She was a mathematician and a philosopher. She wrote medical texts. She studied astronomy. Ancient sources describe her as deeply learned, capable of holding conversations with scholars on any subject. She was a military strategist who personally commanded naval operations. She managed one of the most complex economies in the ancient world, controlling Egypt's grain supply, which fed much of the Mediterranean. She kept Egypt independent for 20 years against the most powerful empire on earth, and she almost pulled it off. The version of Cleopatra that Hollywood gave us, the woman whose only power was her beauty, was invented largely by her enemies. Octavian's propaganda machine worked so well that it survived for 2,000 years. The real Cleopatra was something far more remarkable. She was a ruler who built her power through intelligence, language, strategy, and sheer will. A woman who faced exile at 21, clawed her way back to power, allied with the two most powerful men in the world, and chose death over humiliation. History has never quite known what to do with a woman that powerful, so it turned her into a love story instead. But now you know the truth. Cleopatra was not a myth. She was not a movie. She was one of the greatest rulers the ancient world ever produced, and her story deserves to be told properly.